the ongoing work around cybersecurity at a state level, and just had another good meeting with that group. We're loosely affiliated as CO3, the Cybersecurity Opportunity Coalition of Colorado. So it's more or less a number of folks across the state that all have an interest in solving the supply and demand issue. Colorado certainly ranks down among the bottom as far as being able to provide talent into the opportunity that exists in the state when it comes to cybersecurity. So more to come, but good momentum. Again, there is, I guess all I'll say is there is a sort of channel and an avenue if you come across folks that have direct interest in what's going on at the state level, and a number of pilots are evolving. And Steve, I know you have probably some exposure to this. MSU Denver is certainly a player. There's a sub-grant, a sub-award that was that we're helping to support and move forward. Anyway, got a lot of different sort of people and flavors in the way that's evolving, but yeah, know that that's still ongoing work. And trying to think, the other thing is just a broader conversation around this sort of distributed trust network at the state level. And this will kind of feed into some of the debrief from ETHDenver, but still a lot of interest in, and I think good momentum coming out of that event around this idea of a single sort of distributed network at the state level that marries the digital ID and some of the state ID work with My Colorado, the state data trust. So this is ongoing work around building governance structures around data collaboratives so that data can flow, whether it's between institutions or into state agencies. I know Wendy and Burst probably have some experience around data flows, a lot of similarities in healthcare. And then also just a credentialing network, and have spoken with IBM and the Learner Credential Network and a couple of sort of broader, more mature groups that are doing this work. So again, ongoing, but I think a lot of good momentum coming out of ETHDenver. So I can jump kind of straight into some of the highlights on ETHDenver, or Colin, if you've got anything else.
No, let's jump into it. And if we have someone from CDHE join, they can offer a little bit as well. But yeah, let's get into it.
Hey, Colin, before we go on, is that okay if I ask? Thank you so much for posting the link to the IEEE LER group. Is that open? You probably said this. Is that open to anyone? Like, can I volunteer, and how would I get involved?
So if you want to jump on that listserv there, send a request to join, and then we'll add you in, and the updates come out. We send one or two. It's not a lot, but that'll have an agenda and a link to last meeting's minutes and catch you right up to speed with everything. So just subscribe there.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I serve on other IEEE committees, and it's been a really positive experience. Great,
awesome.
Great networking,
Thanks.
Great opportunity to meet people. So I'm eager to join.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. We've got a pretty steady attendance monthly, and there's almost 200 in the listserv there. So it's a great group of people.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that.
So the real high level, and then we can take it into direction, given that we've got Dean on, and Noah, I know I'd love to hear some perspective on what's evolving maybe at CU. But ETHDenver is an event, for those that don't know, that happens annually, typically in person in Denver, completely virtualized this year, but I think not for the worse. Here are a few stats from this year. Had just over 30,000 views across a number of platforms. A lot of this was streamed via Twitch. About 1,300 basically Web3 hackers and builders and developers that were accepted. 94 countries represented, and most of the U.S., the continental U.S. was also represented. So, yeah, some really amazing. I'm always blown away by the fact that this is a distributed network of folks that put this event on. There is a core organizing team. I've been sort of a educational steward as part of that event for the last few years, but sort of the cohesion and what's able to be pulled together, given that there is this sort of distributed nature in the leadership, is always really impressive. So yeah, the core outputs are in this post that I'll share. If folks just want to sort of dive into the various, there's about $250,000 in bounties up for grabs. That's coming from a few different channels. Also, as part of the event, we focused in on specific state issues in Colorado. And so thanks, Duncan. And so there was a Colorado Jam portion where looked at things like utilizing the digital ID to solve some issues, things around voting and licensing and all sorts of petitioning, means by which blockchain and distributed tech can solve local problems. But then again, you'll see on that list, there's obviously a bunch of other partner protocols and organizations that put up challenges. There's a few follow-ups that are directly, I think, applicable to CLAB and education. DigID is a group that I just reached out to. This is where, this was just last week, so we've still got some follow-ups to do. But they built out some pretty interesting products and won a couple of the education-focused bounties around credentialing and the student student transcript 2.0 is sort of one of the challenges they worked on. So we'll certainly be in touch and share out any sort of outputs from that crew. I don't actually even know where they're based, or some of these teams just sort of come together ad hoc during the week. So sometimes that spins off into actual ventures and new companies. Sometimes they're just distributed groups that continue working on certain projects. The state now, as part of this, has a devoted incubator that will actually be directly connected to ETHDenver. So some of the projects that came out of ETHDenver will still have a vehicle through the state to continue their work. I don't know exactly what the sort of longer term funding model looks like to provide that sustainability for some of these teams. But it was more or less announced that there's this Colorado incubator that sort of is going to be born out of this Colorado Jam. And so in perpetuity, we hope this event will then continue to spark innovation that the state can then incubate internally to solve real problems, most of which are sort of centered around, challenges with bureaucracy and existing sort of friction that exists within state government. So just encouraged by state leadership being, a part of saying, let's do this. I mean, we had our governor, Jared Polis, spent 2 hours on a League of Legends match with a really well-known Twitch gamer. So did a live stream of him, and he's like actually a really impressive gamer, which I didn't realize. So a bunch of different events like that, as well as just the hackathon portion. Duncan, any other reflections, or Colin, obviously, or anyone else that sort of sat in and have any thoughts on just sort of how the event went? And yeah, there was also an entire virtual, this is typically at the Sports Castle, which is it used to be sort of a sporting goods store down on Broadway in Denver, and they take over that entire space every year. But they more or less recreated that entire space virtually. And so opened up a bunch of doors for all kinds of fun things where you could sort of virtually, move in and out of different rooms and find, little Easter eggs and, accrue different points and, all kinds of fun stuff. But was, overall really, really impressed with the event and its evolution. And maybe the last piece for next year, they're going to continue to build out the virtual component. So it's definitely going to be a hybrid event, hoping there'll still be an in-person option available. But there's going to be some piece of the virtual sort of component in what we learned this year will be added on. And there's also now ETHDenver as a both organization and an event is going to convert to a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. They've built a token and a governance structure. It's going to be a community-owned event. As much as it sort of always was, it wasn't really formally structured. But they also announced at the very end, there's a Spork token that's going to be part of this. There's all kinds of fun themes around the buffacorn and the spork marmot, and it's got a really playful theme. But there's going to be an actual a governance token, and it's going to be evolving into a formal decentralized organization, and have different legal structures to be able to, interface with the state, move funds responsibly, all of that sort of thing. So a lot of evolution. There was a lot of things that went wrong, but I'd say a lot more that was learned, and I think it'll bode well for for the years to come for that event.
Yeah. I will say, I think ETHDenver is one of these organizations and events to watch for the next couple of years, because they've always been a bit on the cutting edge of technology, but also governance and things like their bounties earned in cryptocurrency and all sorts of stuff. So I think just keep it in the back of your mind if you're looking for what the future of events and organizations and structures could look like. It's very cool.
I guess I should also share everything. All the sessions were captured, so not that anyone has. It's about a week's worth of content, but feel free to just browse around, and if there's anything that catches your eye, that should be. Most of the major events that were streamed are available there on their YouTube page.
And Taylor, you mentioned interest and involvement from the state of Colorado. Were there any departments in particular that expressed interest or were engaged?
I'd say one of the most encouraging pieces was the state securities commissioner. There was a few key people. She actually led as a judge and was grilling people on why their project was absolutely violating securities law. So that whole sort of it's actually there's a lot of overlap, I think, with maybe some of what we're going to learn through the work with Dean and the World Bank. So I'd say securities and just the sort of legal arm at a state level, really trying to put guardrails around what projects make sense, where there's going to where they're going to run into problems with offering certain tokens as securities or utility token, like helping just support that from a legal standpoint. CDHE, the Department of Higher Ed, certainly was deeply involved, and Spencer Ellis and Michael Vante, who are sort of our core collaborators for C-Lab, definitely played a major role. The Department of Revenue, and then the governor's office. The folks behind My Colorado, Russell and Thad and others, Thad being the state blockchain architect, they more or less ran the entire Colorado Jam sort of track. So slowly there's, last year there was just a sprinkling of one or two people from a couple departments and agencies. I would say it felt like that, scaled up at least 2 or 3 fold. And I think we'll probably see that continue to grow as different agencies just need like incubation and sandboxy sort of spaces to try out and build new things and innovate. So yeah, Dora also was involved. OEdit a little bit, Department of, I'm throwing it around Colorado-based acronyms that I know Wendy understands, but so yeah, I think it's an evolution, but at least it looks like a positive one. And again, I think her name's Tung, is the state securities commissioner. I think she was a shining light amongst the whole. She spent a lot of time, at least probably 4 or 5 hours over the course of the major sort of days as far as project development and judging, and she was really highly involved. And I know she's got plenty going on in her life, so to devote that amount of time to it was cool to see.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that somebody who's diving into for the first time, like I read about it and watched it last year, but joining in the castle and seeing some of the fun ways they recreated things and some of the challenges and the scavenger hunt items that were put out there, there's definitely a lot of promise for a hybrid or even a virtual environment in the future, but also the amount of activity happening on Discord and the collaboration and the work being done there was really fascinating to watch. And just to see the amount of people and effort put into all this, there's a lot of excitement around development in just about every area. So it was really cool to follow along and see all that stuff happening asynchronously as well.
Yeah, so feel free, in fact, I'll share, I just try to keep the communication channels separate, but if there's other groups that might want to get involved, or general interest, feel free to share that email and can connect folks up. The planning has already begun for next year, so this is one of those just sort of ongoing full cycle annual events that takes place. But yeah, excited about both sort of the state agency support as well as CLAB indefinitely. As long as this work's continuing, I think we're going to certainly continue to be involved in the event and try to plug the outputs back into the broader state work. Certainly there's already some pretty good little nuggets that came out around, again, credentialing and mapping some of the sort of student wallet work with the digital ID at the state level, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. Other thoughts or comments? Or yeah, I don't know, Dean, given that we just came off another event, we don't have anyone, I don't think Spencer hopped in, so we can honestly take it in any direction at this point if folks have other thoughts.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear from Dean, just a little recap of the conversation and excitement from this morning's meeting, if you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, I should say too, thank you for inviting me to join this. So we have a particular, I say we, there's an ed tech team at the World Bank. It's not very large, unfortunately, but we have one within the global education practice, and sort of tasked with informing World Bank staff and what we would call client countries, so mainly middle and lower income countries, informing them about the potential to use technology in education projects, and then responding to the needs on their part, and also sort of increasing knowledge, helping out with projects and so on. And that's generally how the World Bank works, sort of the folks who do the projects, and then the rest is sort of kind of help out with that, and then throw in a bit more consultants. But particularly interested in the application of collabs to some of the pilots that we're doing in middle and lower income countries that are incorporating DLT. So there's a little history you should probably be aware of. So it goes back about 10 years with something we called Evoke, which generally speaking were projects that were very integrative and starting to incorporate newer approaches with respect to technology, including with incentivizing learners and things like that. And it started in South Africa, and as it turns out, well, I guess more than that. Bob Hawkins, who leads the ed tech group, was stationed with the bank in South Africa at the time. So he kind of followed this through, and it kind of almost went where he went, and developed over time. And then with the last pilot project we did, it was in Colombia, and as it happened, it was implemented during COVID. But there was a fair amount of kind of blockchain oriented aspects to that project. And with that, we started to get much more interest on the part of World Bank staff and borrowers with respect to including them and including that in projects. so the challenge for us was then, how do you inform them? And we thought, well, let's put together something like a community of practice where we can bring forward folks who were experts in kind of all aspects of utilizing blockchain technologies in education, and see if we could find some folks that were willing to help, because we just sort of with education in general, particularly in K through 12, but over COVID just saw developing countries slipping further and further behind, and so that has been a real concern. So we was introduced to Chris and LEF through, I used to be a venture capitalist. So for my sins, I guess I'm doing this. Although I worked for the World Bank back in the 1990s. But so anyway, a venture friend of mine introduced me to Chris, and it was clear this many months ago. So it was clear there was kind of a complementarity of what we were interested in, and the vision. So LEF, I think, has been very instrumental in us putting together a community of practice, which we see as kind of a smaller group of maybe 20 organizations or so that can share knowledge and talk about how this might apply to developing countries. But we also wanted to have kind of an outlet to share broader knowledge with folks in the development community, or whomever might be interested in applications in middle and lower income countries. So in December, we kicked off a kind of a workshop, because it was the 10th anniversary of doing Evoke projects. And so we used that as a bridge to talk about blockchain and education, then had kind of a formative meeting of the community of practice the day following. And the idea from there has been, I think that the feedback was, well, let's focus on kind of 6 areas throughout the year, every other month, hold community of practice meetings, try and figure out what sort of deliverables there might be. Then just prior to the meetings, again, have a workshop on those topics for the broader community. So today we just sort of laid out, it's almost like a primer on what is blockchain, what is cryptocurrency, what are sort of what kind of challenges are we facing in education that might be that might allow for application in developing countries, and sort of talked about credentials, conditional cash transfers, learner incentivization, decentralized procurement, and supply chain. But we called upon several of the other countries that we've been working with on this, and there is an increasing interest. So then, again, kind of for LEF and your network, how does that work into helping some of these countries get this stuff off the ground? It used to be, when I initially was at the World Bank was pretty, when it wasn't, when the challenges weren't in a lot of ways as complicated as they are now. The World Bank was pretty good at just kind of doing a lot of this stuff on its own with a little bit of reach out, but that's just not the case anymore. And so very much, I think the World Bank's been oriented to developing those partnerships. And I just see LEF and kind of your network as being very important to that. So we were actually talking to Chris about the next step in the pilot program and Colombia is taking it countrywide. There are a few issues that we have to resolve with, actually it's with respect to a platform and Moodle and a few other things. But once we get that straightened out, I'd like to bring Chris into and the team to talk to them about that. But kind of moving on then, we, I should say too, I think today the countries that spoke, can correct me if I'm missing some, but I think it was the Caribbean, Brazil, Bangladesh, Turkey, something that we started in Africa called ACE, which is sort of a group of West African countries getting together to encourage excellence in education, and then Colombia. So kind of got them talking about some of their interests, and then went on to just give a little vignette, kind of a preview of what the next 5 sessions will be. And so the first, and again, we're going to hopefully do these every 3rd Wednesday of every other month, or the 3rd Wednesday of every other month. And so the next one would come up in, I think, April 14th. And we'll talk about education ecosystem and crypto networks. And the idea there too is finding a group of folks in the community of practice to take the lead on that discussion. And I'm jumping around a bit, but tomorrow is a community of practice meeting. And so, yeah, definitely LAS included. And if you all want to be a part of that, please let me know. It is kind of it's kind of more technical, but tomorrow too, I think a lot of it will be admin. You know, how do we want to handle this going forward? And also reviewing, as Duncan mentioned, there were so many follow-up questions and conversations going on today that we'll answer those and hopefully get help from the whole community of practice to do that and get back to people. But then the second issue is skills economy. So that will be, it'd be kind of like mid-June. Those are sort of the skills that should and can be accredited, you know, skills registries and task repositories and things like that. And the third issue or challenge will be learner-centered credentials, you know, kind of digital wallets, identification, student ownership of data. Fourth will be assessment and measurement. Should be kind of mid-October. You know, how do you use blockchain technology to incentivize and automate assessment and learning results verification. That's particularly important to the World Bank because, as Bob mentioned today, it's usually we do a lot of now results-based financing, and it typically, like for every dollar we spent on a project, about almost like 50% or 50 cents is going toward verification, which is just way too high. And then finally, we'll look at tokenomics in mid-December. And Chris gave a little bit of an intro to that today. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I think for the World Bank, it's you know, again, sort of kind of taking advantage, if you will, of a community and bringing in more folks to help out with middle and lower income countries. And I think there'll be all sorts of opportunities with respect to that. And then at the end of the day, I would imagine at some point later on in the year, kind of figure out, do we do anything more with this? Do we create kind of a global public good of some sort? Something sort of open source that folks can take advantage of. But we're not near there yet.
Yeah.
But I was very encouraged. I think we all were of the quality of the folks that showed up today. I think again at its height is about 137. We thought of it initially as being public, but it's really not. We didn't advertise it, and it was really the LEF community, our community, a few others, just kind of inviting people who maybe invited a few others.
Is there, and I know maybe you've chatted with Chris and Bob and others, but some of these folks, we have a few hundred, obviously, interested stakeholders in Colorado. I don't think, is the thought, let this evolve a bit, or is there interest in, growing the group? And I just know there'll be folks that would be interested, but obviously, that's an administrative question, probably more than anything. You get to a certain threshold and meetings become tough to even manage. So
yeah, I'd say you kind of use your own judgment on that. But at least get we'd welcome Colin and whomever kind of getting involved in that, and bring in whomever you see fit. But yeah, there is so one of the things I think we have to talk about tomorrow too is how do we share that knowledge with kind of a broader community? And so we've recorded it. We'll have these questions and responses to those. How do we make that known? Kind of going to do a website, or I don't know. I just see what you're doing in Colorado and other places. I sat in on the meeting you had with the Asia Pacific Collab folks, and I just see a lot of promise in that.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and Noah, Wendy, feel free if you've got thoughts or questions. One of the things I think we can do a better job of is translating, like how much, this work in Colorado is, kind of 2 or 3 years in earnest, but a solid full year of building out this model and really. So the interesting thing that is now happening is a lot of what we're learning, and certainly some of what's come out of the Asia Pacific Lab as well, can be fairly well transferable. There's obviously local dependencies that won't map one-to-one, but making it clear that like this idea of a network of networks, things that are happening here in this small incubation space that we have in one state in the US is absolutely influencing, other states and potentially other countries around the world.
As you're mentioning that, Taylor, I think actually that's sort of ideally suited for the next topic. And so let's talk about, it's probably appropriate then, maybe that should be one sort of session within either the larger workshop or the COP or whatever we want to do.
Sure.
It's kind of funny actually. So typically I'm from the East Coast, but typically I moved to Southern California a bit ago, and there's a lot happening in Orange County, although I live in LA. And there's a group of folks there who want to do kind of an apprenticeship program. There's very good cooperation with private sector businesses in Orange County, and so kind of linking them together with very specific kind of apprenticeship program. And the template there too is Colorado. I forget the group's name, but it came out of one of the former governors. But there's just so much happening there.
Yeah, it's a shared challenge. And Noah, please, I finally see your camera's on. You might be on your phone. Is that what you've got going?
Yeah. It is. And I have a specific kind of, since Dean mentioned, knowledge sharing, a really specific question about some of the work. And sorry for the folks who aren't in Colorado. I think this is a relatively Colorado specific question, but Taylor, and you and Colin are talking about so much of the really exciting stuff that's happening here and elsewhere. And I'm wondering, as Dean mentioned, with just the knowledge sharing, what are some of the things that you're seeing that might have different names in different places, but are super interconnected, that aren't being necessarily, we probably have money being spent. We have, hundreds of hours being, that we're not too far from realizing it was wasted time because of redundant efforts. And I guess two specific things that I'm curious about, on the K-12 side, where the C-Lab, the MyCara journey stuff, and is it completely way off to see that as connected to ways that school districts could be approaching ICAP versus those two being two separate things like they kind of are right now? And then at the higher ed side, something that's, I guess, really closely related to a lot of my day-to-day stuff right now is, whether it's MyCara journey or some of that IEEE work with the LER, as Colorado universities are looking at CLR, what is there stuff that we would be wise to be pumping the brakes on, for exploration or beta testing anything or pilot anything or meeting with vendors, because there's going to be other stuff that's, coming down the pipe that's probably going to meet those needs or, be redundant to it or already paid for by the state.
I mean, I think it's the grandest challenge to be solved of our time. I honestly, and it's why we're thankful, Dean and Bob and folks, see that and are taking action to try to start connecting the dots. That's happening here though. But yeah, it's that has to happen on a local level too. I mean, that's in some ways what C-Lab was always kind of meant to be, was a single signal amongst the noise. And I think it's done a pretty good job at that. But at the same time, there's a lot of I'm in my lane. And this is, this is somewhat of an institutional problem. We've jammed on this quite a bit now, and I've lived it, being in higher ed for a decade. It's to no one's fault. You get in, you have your day-to-day, you have your meetings you've got to take. You don't have time to take in the broader picture. But yes, there are 100%. I'm pretty confident of saying it's not 99. It is guaranteed that there will be, and I use this analogy of, online ed. And I spent a decade at MSU Denver trying to say, we probably should explore, this was 15 years ago, saying, I think having some sort of vehicle within the university to talk about online education is probably going to be, important. It's happening again. And there are going to be those that look back 10 years from now saying, we just didn't connect the dots and didn't quite map towards that future. So, there's no perfect answer for it, but that's certainly, I think, a big part of what we're trying to help provide is to say, there's a movement. There's absolutely a broad global movement to, both reinvent the technical infrastructure, but also just build a new paradigm on a social level around what's possible. And blockchains are a small piece of that. They're not certainly the single technology that's going to, change everything, but it's a suite of things. It's the open standards. It's the CLR, LER, take your pick on the acronym with credentials. It's this whole, it's a skills-based economy. It's that whole package. And I think it just takes a village. So the more, I mean, I know you understand a lot of this stuff and can do your small part at CU. And yeah, I don't know if others have thoughts, but I mean, this is to me the biggest challenge, and everyone feels it. There's nobody in education that's not that's a problem. I don't know exactly how to tackle it, but it's got to be an ecosystem approach.
Yeah, that's what I would offer too, is that this is the charge of the IEEE working group right now, is that we voted in a trust triangle that is a graphic that I think most people here are familiar with, in terms of, the issuer, the verifier, and the learner, or the owner of what, and even the person that we're talking about, the person in the middle. Some are saying, well, that's the employee, that's the learner, that it's a person, regardless of what title you give it on there. And we spent 15 minutes talking about, well, is the verifier really like, you know, also the issuer, and what term is it a reviewer? And we spent 20 minutes. This is a global group of 60 people debating one word that's going to go into a graphic. And that, I think, encouraged us towards the open source movement, which is, you know, these are going to be recommended practices from an international body that people trust and look to for some guidance. And there are some technical specs there that are going to be recommended based on a lot of these smaller working groups and collabs that are fleshing things out. So I think, as Taylor mentioned, like Colorado's one example. All of a sudden, North Dakota has become this place that they're talking about on a global scale as having success going beginning to end, verifying some credentials that are issued by a school and by a government. And that shows some promise. So that's just one recommended practice on a way to do it. And I think that is like that's what we're trying to share is like, hey, everybody doesn't have to do their own thing. Like schools are great at this, right? Like every school takes their continuums, takes their transcripts and says, hey, this is what you need to know. And these are ours. And we're really proud of this. We don't want to use somebody else's. We don't always want to accept somebody else's credits. We want to make sure that they, you know, verify and align with what we as an institution think. And so I think it's kind of tricky to have one solution for it all, but definitely having a model or a pipeline that people can move on that has some examples to build from, I think would be, if people are wise to take a listen and a look and start to try some of those things and use what's already being done, as opposed to trying to reinvent the whole wheel. And I think that's a lot of the work here, is that there are groups that are providing some of that. And that's, I think, the Internet of Education group, that's what we're trying to push forward too, is that, hey, there's an ecosystem at play here. What are some things that we can leverage to help us in our current situation? So I'm sure others have some thoughts on that too. And I saw Michael put his screen on. Good to see here, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know we're down to the last 10 minutes or so, but since Michael hopped in, I'd love to give you some time. And Noah, while I have you, I'm actually meeting with Brad and Ramey, and he's doing some strategic planning for ETHDenver. Let's find a time, because I'd love to either bridge that, because they're looking at what does ETHDenver look like in 5 years, I think is sort of his charge. So anyway, either bringing you into that conversation, or let's make sure we follow up, because there's a lot of people thinking about it right now. But yeah, sorry, Michael, can you bring us home? How does this all relate back to MCJ and data in the state? And yeah, no worries about jumping in late. I don't know what you caught or what context you've got, so we can jump back a little bit if we need to.
No worries. Yeah, great to see you all. Again, I apologize. I'm bouncing around a lot today. For those of you who I don't know, Michael Vonte, I'm the Senior Director of Research and Data Governance at the Colorado Department of Higher Education. Very much agree with everything that you all have been talking about. I think having this place is, as you say, Taylor, to kind of break through the chatter, connect the dots, whatever kind of metaphor you want to use, extremely helpful, because there are so many great things going on in Colorado. And if we can just capture the energy, I think that would be super exciting. On the My Colorado Journey front, we continue to lean into all of that work. To be able to provide that free platform for career education, training, exploration for Coloradans of any age. To Noah, to your point, and I put it into the chat too, we have built out the functionality in MCJ to be able to support not only students, but also professionals complete the ICAP requirements, ICAP, individualized career and academic planning for Colorado students. And so being able to have that functionality in MCJ and continuing to build out the content with districts' help, with CDE's help, with all the other folks who are kind of part of that table is something that we'll continue to do. And I hope be a great tool for districts. Districts are put into a hard place in terms of how they best serve their students and meeting different requirements. Do we districts need to go out to a vendor to help us get the right technology and we're a small district, so we can afford that. So what we're hoping is that something like MCJ can provide that level playing field to districts who are well-resourced, and districts who aren't, and being able to fill that gap. Now, MCJ is never going to replace a human-to-human contact, but to be able to put that information in people's hands and to be able to have the data trust, which knits together all of the data in well-governed, responsible ways to be able to push out to that experience. We want to do more and more and more of that as much as we can. So that's all exciting. I'll also say one of the areas that we've started to dip our toe more into is being able to present MCJ as a tool in the post-secondary space. So we've started to have some conversations with ETHDenver and some other institutions who have expressed interest in just learning more about what MCJ could do for them, and what a post-secondary institution could do in terms of that professional, that professional area of being able to manage students, to be able to provide them with content, and how it might dovetail as best as it could with some other things that, of course, institutions are doing. So we've just started some of those conversations, but I'm encouraged by them and just thinking about more and more ways to get these things in the hands of folks. I'll also throw out a new tidbit of information. The Office of Information Technology here in Colorado has a new chief data officer. I think she is pretty new to the job, just a couple days, if I'm remembering correctly. I'll put her information into the chat just so you all can know about that. But I'm hopeful that that will lead to even more leadership and connecting of dots and energy within OIT and all the other state agencies that OIT serves.
That's awesome. Thanks, Michael, as always. Yeah. I know you've got a couple things to think about, and it's always awesome to get the perspective straight from the spigot. I'm trying to think of the data. Where does it originate? So we can. There's also, isn't there a Allison Griffin at Whiteboard? I saw something on Twitter. Some new. Is there a leadership group of maybe commissioners? I can't remember what's that group that just recently formed.
Yeah, I don't know the name. I don't know how much we CDHE are involved, probably at least somewhat, because one of our commissioners is part of it. I'm going to get the name wrong, but I think it's a grouping of the different trustees at all of the institutions. So statewide. So being able to have a place where all the different trustees at these post-secondary institutions, I think, can compare notes, a learning community, all of that. I was unaware of that too, so I need to do a little bit of learning myself on what that means and looks like, but just being able to leverage that as well.
I think to Noah's point, that maybe that's a vehicle to do some of this and get the right dots connected. We'll have to see. I don't know enough about it, but we're right up towards the end here, 3 minutes. Wendy, I don't know if making some connections back to some of Burst's work, or I want to make sure you had a chance, or if anyone else has final thoughts.
Thanks. So Burst IQ is also working on an LER program, and we're working with an institution and a learning nurse education program. And so I'm going to put myself out there if any of you have experience doing this, because one of the things that we're working on is trying to get that great value proposition to get organizations to change their current practices. Even when there's friction, there's kind of slow movement toward innovative technology. And so I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and if you have any thoughts, I'd just love to learn from you so that we can continue to work together to improve some of the logistics that we're facing in creating some of these LER records.
That's awesome. Yeah, and talk about connecting dots. Like, there's just so many parallels with what's evolving on the healthcare side. And for those that don't know Burst IQ, definitely worth taking a look at. I mean, certainly one of the most successful blockchain-based companies, I think globally, but the fact that it was born in Colorado.
Yeah, it's been such a privilege to work here. We've had a blockchain in production for 3 years, almost 4 years. And we specialize in the healthcare space, but healthcare includes many different avenues, including what we're learning is nursing and physician credentials.
I can tell you're working as we speak. because there's some.
Yes, there's a lot of activity,
Definitely.
and thankfully, there's a lot of great movement for blockchain in space. And I shared at the beginning of the hour that we're supporting vaccine tracking in a few states. So blockchain has a huge role.
Cool. Any final thoughts from anyone? And otherwise, we'll sign off. I always say when it's a smaller group, we can keep it kind of short, but I just love these conversations. So we always fill the hour.
No,
Cool.
I enjoyed the conversation as well, and everybody sharing some of the work that they're doing, and always in between meetings, these meetings anyway, if a lot of great connections being made. Wendy will definitely get connected on the IEEE stuff, and no, I hope you and Taylor connect, because I think there is a lot of work already being done, and with Michael and the team that I think we can all push the efforts together, because a lot more aligns than separates us, especially with all these conversations. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining in.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll echo Noah's thumbs up. Thanks again, Dean. We'll probably see you tomorrow.